I didn't see her again in a lecture hall, the way I'd always imagined I might. No, she was sitting at a corner table in the campus coffee shop, alone, reading something that wasn't even a textbook. A paperback with a creased spine, her thumb working over the same page like she wasn't really reading it at all. I almost walked past her. It had been years since college, and she wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to belong to memory, to that foggy period when you mistake admiration for invincibility. But there she was, older than before, mid-40s now, hair tied up too carelessly to be deliberate, glasses sliding a little down her nose. She looked like she had been waiting for someone, but not in the eager way. More in the way people wait because it's easier than going home. I ordered a black coffee. I'd meant to find a seat by the window, but my feet slowed in her direction, like I was tugged by something quieter than decision. "Still loyal to black coffee?" she said without looking up. The sound of her voice, it punched straight through the ears. I must have told her that once, offhand, when I was 20, and trying too hard to sound older. I laughed, but it came out uneven. "You remember that?" Finally, she lifted her eyes. That was the first time I noticed the small shift at the corner of her mouth, not quite a smile, not quite regret either. "I remember more than I should," she said. We sat there with the kind of silence you don't plan for. She closed her book, thumb still marking the page, and asked if I was still writing. I told her I wasn't. I asked if she was still teaching. She shook her head. The pauses between our words seemed heavier than the words themselves. I folded the napkin on the table into a crooked square, unfolding it again when I realized my hands were restless. She noticed. I flicked my eyes toward her hands instead, steady, resting on the paperback, nails clipped short. "What are you doing back here?" I asked. "Habit," she said. Then, after a beat, "Loneliness, maybe." Her tone was light, but it left no space for a reply. We talked about safe things after that, the bakery across the street closing down, the new bookstore opening by the library, the way the coffee had gotten worse but no one seemed to care. Every so often, our eyes met, then darted away. It felt less like conversation and more like circling something neither of us wanted to name. When I finally stood to leave, she didn't ask where I was going, just tilted her head slightly as though she might. I hesitated, phone in my pocket buzzing with a notification I ignored. She tapped her closed book against the table, once, twice, as if keeping time. I walked out into the thin afternoon sunlight, convinced that was the end of it. People like her stay in memory, not in the present. But as I reached the corner, my phone vibrated again. This time, a message. From her. It said only, "We should talk. There's something I never told you." I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, the light changing, people brushing past me. Her name glowed on my screen, as if the years between us had just been erased. And I knew, whatever came next, it wouldn't be simple. Her text lingered in my head the rest of the afternoon. "We should talk. There's something I never told you." I didn't reply, not right away. I told myself I was busy, that it didn't matter anymore. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid of what she might say, and of what I might feel if she said it. The next day, I saw her again. Not in the coffee shop this time. She was kneeling by the lobby mailboxes of our building, sorting through envelopes like someone searching for an answer. "You live here?" I asked. She looked up, startled at first, then shook her head. "My sister does. I check her mail when she's gone." It explained everything and nothing at once. I should have left it there. But when she asked if I wanted to come upstairs for tea, just tea, nothing more, I heard myself say yes before thinking. Her sister's apartment was tidy in the way lived-in places are, faint smell of detergent, a pile of folded laundry, a mug with a crack down the side. She moved around the kitchen with quiet certainty, filling the kettle, setting out 2 mismatched cups. I sat at the table, trying not to notice the way her sleeves slipped when she reached for the tea tin. "You always looked so serious back then," she said over her shoulder. "Like you were carrying more than your share." I laughed softly. "I thought you'd barely notice me." "I notice," she said. Simple. No ornament. The kettle whistled, cutting the silence. She poured carefully, steam rising between us. I wrapped my hands around the cup, though it was too hot to hold. We talked in fragments. She mentioned her divorce, how long it had been, how she wasn't sure if loneliness was better or worse than compromise. I confessed I'd never really learned how to stay anywhere for long: jobs, relationships, even friendships. The air between us thickened with every small truth. I wondered if she felt it too, or if I was only imagining it. There was an age gap you could measure in decades, and an unspoken history, me, once just another student in the row she lectured, her, the unreachable figure at the front of the room. I caught myself staring at her hands again. She noticed, but didn't move them. "Do you ever think about that time?" I asked. Her eyes flicked up, steady on mine. "More than I should." We let that sit. The tea cooled untouched. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. For a second, I thought she might say something else, about the message, about the years in between. But she didn't. Instead, as I stepped into the hallway, she reached out lightly, brushing a crease from my sleeve with her fingertips. It lasted no more than a breath. Still, it felt like a line had been crossed, one we couldn't uncross. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I tried not to go back. For a few days, I convinced myself it was nothing, just a coincidence, just old familiarity tugging where it shouldn't. I buried myself in routine, early mornings, late nights, headphones on in between. But every time I passed the building lobby, I slowed, listening for the shuffle of her steps on the stairs, the clink of her keys at the mailbox. She noticed. Of course she did. "You're avoiding me," she said one evening when I nearly collided with her outside the elevator. Her tone was mild, but her eyes stayed on me longer than I could manage. "I'm not," I said too quickly. Her smile didn't quite reach her face. "You are." The elevator arrived. We stepped in together, silence pressing close in the small space. I kept my eyes on the glowing numbers, but I felt the brush of her sleeve against mine. Deliberate or not, I couldn't tell. When the doors opened, I should have walked out. Instead, I followed her down the hall, telling myself I was just being polite. She unlocked her sister's door and glanced back once, almost asking, almost warning. Inside, everything felt sharper. The kettle, the chairs, the half-folded laundry from last time, all the same, but heavy now, as though carrying the memory of what hadn't happened. She poured tea again. We sat. Steam rose between us. "You're quiet tonight," she said. I shrugged, fingers tracing the rim of my cup. "Just tired." But that wasn't it. What I wanted to say was, I don't know what this is. I don't know if you want me here, or if I just want to be here too much. Instead, I asked about her book. She tilted her head, studied me, then answered anyway. A knock at the door startled us both. Her sister's neighbor, an older man, stood there holding a package. He greeted her warmly, his eyes flicking toward me with a question he didn't voice. She thanked him, closed the door quickly, and set the box aside. But the interruption left something cracked open. She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "This isn't appropriate," she said softly, almost to herself. I swallowed. "Then why ask me up here?" Her eyes lifted, sharp, then softened. "Because it's been a long time since I felt less alone." The words clung in the air. Neither of us moved. I imagined reaching for her hand, imagined leaning in across the table. The pictures came too easily, too vividly. Instead, I said nothing. She set her cup down, the porcelain clinking against the saucer. Then she leaned forward slightly, close enough that I could see the faint line of weariness at the edge of her smile. "I shouldn't," she whispered. But she didn't move back. Neither did I. And for one suspended moment, her breath mingling with mine, silence humming louder than words, it felt like we were right at the edge of something that could change everything. We started walking together. Not planned. Just small overlaps. Her leaving the building when I was coming back, or me slowing down when I noticed her ahead on the sidewalk. She never asked if I wanted to join her. She just adjusted her pace, and I matched it. One evening, the air was heavy with the kind of heat that made everything sluggish. She carried a grocery bag in one hand, and I offered to take it. She shook her head at first, then handed it over with a small sigh. "You don't have to," she said. "I know." We ended up on a bench outside the corner store, the bag between us. A few cars hummed by. The streetlight flickered once, then steadied. It felt like the world had shrunk to that small patch of pavement. She looked tired, but not in the way of long days, more like someone who had been carrying things too long. "You should be spending time with people your age," she said suddenly, eyes fixed on the passing headlights. I tried to laugh it off. "What does that even mean?" "It means," she said slower now, "that this, us, it doesn't make sense." The word us caught in my chest. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the way she said it, flat, restrained, made it clear she was trying to build a wall. "You think I don't know how this looks?" she added. Her voice was quiet, almost drowned by a car engine, but I heard it. I swallowed. "I don't care how it looks." That made her finally turn to me. Her eyes searched mine like she was looking for a lie. "But you will. Eventually." The silence after that pressed hard. I picked at the hem of my sleeve. She folded and unfolded her grocery receipt. Small, restless movements, both of us avoiding the center of what we were circling. Then she said it. Not loud, not sharp. Just slipped out like she couldn't hold it anymore. "I used to notice you, you know. Back then." The words knocked something loose in me. My breath caught, and before I could stop it, I admitted. "I used to wait for you to look up. Even once." Her lips parted, but no reply came. She just stared, eyes dark in the weak light, and for a moment I thought, maybe. But then she exhaled, shaking her head. "This is dangerous." The word didn't scare me. What scared me was the tremor in her voice when she said it. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the pavement. My pulse felt too loud in my ears. "So why are we here?" I didn't mean for it to sound like a challenge, but it did. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the grocery bag, fingers brushing mine when she did. Neither of us pulled back right away. The touch was nothing. The touch was everything. And in that moment, it felt like the whole night was leaning toward a single question, unasked, but hanging between us like the air before a storm. The next time I looked for her, she wasn't there. No mailbox visits. No walks. No tea in her sister's kitchen. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. People get busy. Days don't always align. But the silence stretched. A week passed, then another. I stopped pretending not to notice. One evening, I knocked on her sister's door. No answer. I stood there longer than I should have, listening for footsteps, the kettle, anything. Nothing came. And then, days later, I saw her. Not in the lobby, not at the cafe. Outside, across the street, sliding into the passenger seat of a car I didn't recognize. A man in his 50s, maybe older, leaning to kiss her cheek before driving off. She didn't see me. I went home with my chest buzzing like static. Not heartbreak, no, something duller, stranger. Like standing on the edge of a sentence that never found its period. That night, my phone lit up. Her name on the screen. But the message wasn't for me. Not really. Sorry I disappeared. Needed space. Thought it was better that way. I stared at it for too long. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, backspacing through half-formed replies. I understand. I don't want space. Why him? None of them felt right. In the end, I set the phone down without sending anything. The next day, I tried to fall back into rhythm. Wake up. Coffee. Work. Pretend not to glance at the building across from mine. Pretend not to hear echoes of her voice in the hallways. But the more I tried to forget, the clearer she became in my mind. Her half-smiles, her restless hands on a cup of tea, her voice breaking just enough when she said dangerous. The worst part wasn't the distance. It was knowing she had let me close enough to believe I was different, and then pulled away without explanation. One afternoon, I found myself at the cafe again, same corner where it started. Her seat was empty, but I sat there anyway. Ordered the same coffee. Waited like a fool. I don't know how long I stayed. Long enough for the barista to switch shifts. Long enough for me to pull out my phone and type a message I never sent: "You don't have to disappear. I'd rather be near you than not at all." I read it 3 times, then erased it. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. When I left, the chair across from me was still empty. And I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe that was the point. It wasn't dramatic when it happened. No rainstorm, no cinematic timing. Just me leaving the cafe late one evening, and her standing at the corner, grocery bag in hand like nothing had changed. We froze a second too long, both deciding whether to keep walking or stop. Finally, she shifted the bag higher on her hip and said, "You've been avoiding me." I almost laughed. I thought it was the other way around. We walked side by side, no plan, until we reached the bench outside her sister's building. She set the bag down at her feet, sat, and gestured for me to do the same. For a while, we just listened to the low hum of traffic. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It felt weighted, like a rope pulled taut between us. "I shouldn't have left like that," she said finally. "You don't owe me anything," I replied. My voice was steadier than I felt. "That's not true." She smoothed the crease of the grocery bag. "I owed you honesty." I looked at her, but she kept her eyes fixed forward. "Then be honest now." Her breath caught, almost a laugh but not quite. "You were my student once." "My?" She cut herself off. "That should have been enough reason to stay away." "And yet," I said. "And yet," she exhaled, her shoulders sinking. "I noticed you then. I notice you now. That's the part one don't know what to do with." The words lodged in my chest. I wanted to reach for her, to bridge the small, unbearable space between us. But I also knew what it would cost, what silence had been protecting us from. "I kept thinking," I said quietly. "If I meant anything to you, you would have stayed." Her head turned slowly, her eyes finding mine. They looked tired, but not unkind. "I left because you mean something. More than you should." The world seemed to hold its breath. Neither of us moved. Her hand rested on the bench between us, fingers curling and uncurling like she wasn't sure whether to close the distance. I reached halfway. Not her hand, just close enough for her to see I was willing. The choice was hers. For a moment, I thought she'd retreat again. But then her fingers stilled, and she let them brush against mine. Barely there. Enough. No declarations. No promises. Just the quiet weight of contact, saying what we'd both been too careful to name. She gave the smallest smile, fragile but real. "Okay," she whispered. And I nodded, because it was all either of us could offer. Okay. Time didn't race after that night. It moved the way it always does, quietly, with its small routines and ordinary demands. But something had shifted. I began to notice her more in the mornings. Not waiting, not planned, just 2 people who happened to leave their buildings around the same time. 8:47 a.m., give or take. She'd nod, I'd fall and step beside her, and we'd walk as if it had always been that way. Some mornings, she carried a thermos of tea. She'd sip slowly, watching steam curl in the air. I stuck to black coffee, even when it went cold in my hand. One day she offered me a sip of her tea, wrinkling her nose when I said no. The next morning, I brought her a spare cup of coffee, just to even the score. Neither of us admitted we liked it that way. The bench outside the corner store became ours without discussion. Sometimes we sat there after errands, the bag of groceries resting between us. Other times we ended up there by accident, both too tired to head straight home. We didn't need to fill the silence. The hum of the street was enough. She didn't vanish anymore. And I stopped waiting for her to. It wasn't a dramatic shift, just the slow, careful building of a pattern, checking in, showing up, letting days collect until the weight of them felt like something steady. Not a grand romance. Not a secret affair. Just two people who had once missed their moment, now making do with the time they had. One evening, as we sat on the bench with the sky dimming, she said, "Do you ever regret it?" I knew what she meant. All the years between then and now. Sometimes, I said honestly. But then I think, if it had happened earlier, maybe it wouldn't have lasted. She nodded, as though she'd been waiting for that answer. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Later, walking her to her sister's door, she paused, adjusting the strap of her bag. Her hand brushed mine, deliberate this time. Not a question. Not hesitation. Just simple contact, like reaching for a familiar handle. I realized then, peace doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from ordinary mornings, shared silences, the knowledge that someone will be at the bench when you sit down. She looked at me, the faintest smile touching her lips. "Okay," she said again. And I smiled back, because only we knew what that word meant. Sparkles, if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who believes love doesn't need fireworks to matter. Subscribe for more quiet, real love stories, the ones that feel like they could have happened yesterday.